When World War II broke out in September of 1939 in Europe, the Nazis had not yet embarked upon the mass systematic murder of the Jews. This would come with their invasion of the Soviet Union in the summer of 1941, where they first began shooting Jewish men and then extended it to Jewish women and children as well. Over the course of the next months, this would coalesce into something called the Final Solution, which would be a policy of murdering all Jews everywhere across the face of Europe. In late 1941, the Nazis set off the first extermination camp. During the course of 1942, they would set up 5 more extermination camps. Jews from ghettos in Eastern Europe were sent by train to the extermination camps, as were Jews from transit camps throughout Western Europe. As the war unfolded, they needed labor more and more, and they began selecting Jews to perform labor for them. The result was they set up a very large network of labor camps in which there were Jews and non-Jews, but Jews were treated the worst with tremendous brutality, and therefore a great many Jews died in the framework of performing forced labor for the Nazis. Although the Nazis were willing to exploit some Jews for labor for a while, ultimately their goal was to murder all of them. The result was that some 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust.
When you teach about the final solution, you should of course deal with the historical context and the development of the final solution as an historical issue. However, we suggest not to alienate our students from the story, not to distance them from this historical event and even traumatize them with these facts and horrifying messages. We choose to focus on the human story. Using multidisciplinary sources, we try to understand how people maintain dignity, how they struggled for life, how they struggled for their identity in a world of dehumanization and of murder.
Giving the victims a name, a face, rather than focusing on numbers, evokes a sense of empathy. They become real people with emotions, with feelings, with aspirations. Ellis Lewin was 12 years old when he was deported from the Lodz ghetto to Auschwitz-Birkenau with his father, his mother, and his sister.
Auschwitz-Birkenau, located in Poland, was the largest extermination and concentration camp set up by the Nazis. Historians estimate that up to 1.3 million people were murdered in the camp, and the vast majority of them were Jews, perhaps up to 1.2 million. Almost all of the Jews sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau were murdered immediately upon arrival. A minority of them were taken into the camp to perform forced labor and become inmates.
When we arrived to Auschwitz, the minute they opened the wagons, it was just total, complete misery, beatings and screamings and beatings and barking of dogs and growling of dogs. And we were just holding on to each other, and I don't know, within minutes, my mother and my sister were dragged to one side, and I was dragged with my dad to go to another side. And my dad hollered to her, "You take care of her, I'll take care of him."
Ellis focuses on the pace and on the sounds. He talks about the shouting, the barking, the yelling. He talks about the pace. Everything happened fast. There was a rhythm to this whole chaotic process. The purpose behind this was to confuse them, to make them feel like they don't know what's going to happen next. This was the system. In Ellis's testimony, he describes the rupture, the dismantling, the tearing apart of everything. Families are being torn from one another. At the same time, we see this attempt of continuity, the attempt to cling on to family. So Ellis's father says to his mother, "You take care of her, I'll take care of him." This is an attempt to continue in a world that's constantly fracturing, rupturing, and falling apart. The tension and struggle between rupture and continuity is something we see reoccurring in so many stories of Jews in the Holocaust, in ghettos and in camps.
My dad threw me in front of him. The one thing you didn't want is for the Germans to see that you were holding on to your child, because that was the whole idea, is to break up the family, murder the family. That was the genocide of the whole thing. So by not identifying that this is your child, there was a little bit of an edge you had to possibly survive.
Ellis's testimony evokes empathy with no need for simulation or role-playing. Watching his testimony gives a feeling as if he's traveling back in time, as if he's almost reliving what happened there. It gives a sense of authenticity and enables us to touch upon times, to touch upon the events that happened decades ago. The Auschwitz album is the only photographical evidence left from the camp. Combining this with Ellis's testimony allows us a better understanding, a wider perspective of what happened in the camp. This photo reveals the chaos Ellis describes. Without his words, we would not understand the significance of the group of people walking along the fence. We would not understand that these are people walking on their last journey towards the gas chambers. In this photo, focusing on the last journey, we don't see faces. Nevertheless, it reveals the human story. These are the people the Germans saw as their enemies.
It's important to emphasize that we bring in the voices of the survivors because we tell the story of the Holocaust through the human lens, in a human perspective. But we should always remember that the majority of Jews were murdered during the Holocaust. Their voices will remain forever silent. Avraham Bomba, who survived the Treblinka death camp, emphasizes the point that the majority of Jews were murdered during the Holocaust, saying, "That day they took out from 18,000 people, 5 people." Ellis brings into the discussion the human perspective, the individual experience of the Holocaust. Avraham Bomba offers us a greater picture, the totality of the final solution. Elie Wiesel, a Nobel Prize winner and a famous author who wrote many books about the Holocaust, wrote a famous book called Night in 1954. Elie was 15 years old when he arrived to Auschwitz with his father and his mother and his sister. In his book, he describes how his childhood was completely shattered in moments and how he became an inmate struggling for life. Many moments he describes are defining moments that completely changed his life, such as the separation from his mother and his sister.
An SS came toward us wielding a club. He commanded, "Men to the left, women to the right." 8 words spoken quietly, indifferently, and without emotion. 8 simple, short words. Yet that was the moment when I left my mother.
Another defining moment is when someone started reciting the Kaddish. In Jewish tradition, when a person dies, a member of the family says Kaddish, which is the prayer for the dead after them. If someone in the community does not have any children, someone takes it upon himself as a responsibility to say Kaddish for them.
I don't know whether during the history of the Jewish people, men have ever before recited Kaddish for themselves. Yiskadal v'yiskadash me'irabu. May his name be celebrated and sanctified, whispered my father.
At this defining moment, at arrival in Auschwitz, they understand there might be nobody to say Kaddish after them. This is the end of the Jewish nation.
There are many similarities between Ellis Lewin's and Elie Wiesel's stories. As an author, Elie describes the events, but adds the meaning behind the events. He raises significant questions of humanity, of the relationship between human beings and God, of the significance of family. In these photos, we can see the process of dehumanization described by the survivors. This is what the women looked like upon arrival to the camp. And this is what they look like a few hours later. You can barely recognize these are women.
The cold and the hunger tormented us more and more every day. We became moving corpses, exactly like those we met when we arrived. Every day there were piles of bodies by the barracks. From morning till night, the smoke didn't stop. Autumn arrived, and with it, the rains and the cold. We knew that we would not be able to withstand the snow that would come, and that we would die of the frost one by one, like flies.
Entering the camp completely changed people's life. Those who weren't sent to the gas chambers became inmates, nothing but a number, living in constant fear of selection. Many of them could not withstand the unbearable physical and emotional conditions. Many of them perished in the camp.
There was no place to escape the cold. We slept in our clothes and sometimes in our shoes. The worst moment, though, was waking. It demanded the same decision every morning. I had to choose whether to fight or give in.
So what made it possible for some to bear the horrifying emotional and physical conditions? What made it possible for them to live in the shadow of death? We choose to address this significant question through artifacts. These objects are the only remnants from a destroyed world. They take on a symbolic meaning beyond their functionality. The fact that we can see, feel, and touch these artifacts makes us feel as if we're touching history.
While imprisoned in Auschwitz, Yanka Brezhnev traded a full day's ration of bread for this comb. She kept it throughout the war and ever since. Yanka could not shower. She didn't have any clean clothes, but she was clinging to this comb. Clinging to the comb meant she was still a woman. This photo was given to Pavel Fisk from his wife, Annie. The two were married 3 days before he was deported to Auschwitz. In some way, they believed that maybe this would help them find each other after the war. Pavel kept this photo with an inscription from his beloved wife throughout the whole war. First, he hid it in his own mouth, and then he hid it in a sock.
As part of the process of dehumanization, all personal belongings were taken away from the inmates. Most of them were left with nothing. Holding on to anything personal in the camp meant endangering life. Those who chose to hold on to a personal artifact did it because it meant that they were keeping their dignity, that they were maintaining their identity, that they were hanging on to who they were. Without a sense of meaning, it was very difficult to survive in a world of chaos.
In 1944, Tzvi Kopylevich was weak and starving, yet he purchased this prayer book from a Russian inmate, trading it for his daily ration of bread. Tzvi kept the book at his entire journey of suffering from one camp to another.
סידור זה נרכש על ידי באושוויץ תמורת חלק ממנת לחם היומית שלי. עם הסידור הזה עברתי כל מסע הייסורים במחנות מוות וריכוז בגרמניה. את הסידור הזה הנה תורם היום ליד ושם למסגרת לדורות הבאים.
And so we go to the museum. And what should we do? Weep? No. My good friends, we never try to tell the tale to make people weep. It's too easy. We didn't want pity. If we decided to tell the tale, it is because we wanted the world to be a better world. Just a better world, and learn and remember, what is our role? We must become the messengers.